seeking alternatives such as the alt-right and traditionalism, etc.?
Well, look, if you're seeking the alt-right as an alternative to conservatism, you've already abandoned conservatism. The alt-right is a basic form of statism. It's not conservatism. The alt-right is an echo of a series of statist nationalist enterprises that have come and gone over the generations. And the fact of the matter is, they're highly racially inflected. They're not constitutional. They're not conservative. So if you're seeking that, you've already abandoned conservatism and move on. Don't let the door hit you on the ass on the way out.
Great answer. Um, Next question is from another user in the text chat. Do you hate Trump's ideology or him as a person?
I don't hate either. Trump has no ideology. He has no beliefs. He has no philosophy except what gratifies his ego. There's no philosophy there to hate. There's nothing there except a series of impulses and prejudices. And so there's no philosophical underpinning to Trump at all. And I find that objectionable because I am a conservative and I believe in limited government. I believe in constrained power of the state. And I believe in American exceptionalism, American idealism in many ways. I believe in the Constitution. He believes in none of those things. And and I do, in fact, dislike his personality because Donald Trump is a grifter, a con artist, a cheat, a scumbag, and a guy who's fucked people over his entire life. And that's not going to change. And now, he looks at this just as a larger pool of marks for the latest con. So no, I dislike his character, and he has no ideology to dislike. He doesn't believe in anything.
All right. Next question. Rick, you claim you're against Donald Trump, but one would argue you are only behind establishment Republicans. Take John McCain, for instance. He is a perfect example of the person you would support, although he has done nothing for veterans, and now he's about to die and has still done nothing for veterans, yet he's the type of person I would think you would support.
Well, you're mistaken about John and veterans. And secondly, um, you know, John McCain and I have had our differences over the years. John McCain and I have had a number of differences over the years. And including when I made the Reverend Wright ad against Barack Obama, John McCain was not particularly happy with me. That said, I do believe that John McCain is an actual American hero. I do believe that the current president's behavior towards John McCain has been utterly abysmal. And I do believe that John is a person of enormous character. And if you would have preferred Barack Obama to John McCain as president, well, check your predicates.
Great answer. And I do remember that when you did that with John. So he does not just support John. The next question comes from another user. Rick, how do you think the Republican Party will change tactics next election cycle to help unite conservatives?
Well, I don't know that they necessarily will. I mean, look, you can have two versions of the Republican Party. Okay, you can have a party that has a top-down ideological checklist that's based out of Washington D.C., and you can have everybody has to follow that exact checklist. And right now, that checklist is Trumpism. Or you can have a party that's able to go and win in places that Republicans might not win ordinarily. Look, I helped elect a Republican governor in Vermont 4 times. Not exactly friendly territory. Was he perfect in every Tea Party ideological checkbox? No. But would you rather have a Democratic governor or a Republican governor? Would you rather have a conservative or a statist? And these are questions that you have to answer when you're looking at how the party works. If you have a candidate who's running for office in an incredibly liberal district, do you demand that they actually toe every single line of Donald Trump? Would you rather have a bigger majority or a smaller majority? Would you rather have a majority or a minority? A lot of people have this romanticized vision of, oh, we'll just have a small band of incredibly pure people who all believe the same exact thing. Well, I'm sorry, but this is a republic, and in a republic, you're supposed to represent your state and your district if you're a senator or a member of Congress, and reflect the values of the people that elected you. And not everybody is the same. This idea of this homogeneous ideological, single issue top down flavor. That to me is much more of a statist version of how politics would be done, or frankly, how the National Democrats.
All right, thank you. This next question comes from a user that follows you quite a bit. They said, Rick, is your movie a final push to stop the new Republican base and push it towards neoconservatism, which I believe you advocate?
That's a silly question. The documentary is about the fact that Donald Trump uh, promised things that he could never deliver, that he promised wins and victories and achievements that could never be done. And it's an illustration and a story of how everyone who sold themselves and sold their principles to him has ended up getting fucked. And and by the way, the whole neoconservatism thing, guys, grow the fuck up, okay? Get a grip. Just say neoconservative. When you mean to say Jew, get it out there. Just say it. If you want to say Jew, just say it. But here's the thing:
Yes.
the neoconservative smear is a silly juvenile little thing. And I know you guys jerk yourselves off to it, but enjoy. Moving on.
So goddamn true. Thank you. I hope that was your response and that was what we got. All right, the next question is from a user, and the question is, are there any aspects of Bernie Sanders' message you resonate with?
No, Bernie Sanders is a filthy communist.
Can you because there's
No,
quite a few here.
Bernie is every version of the leftist tropes of, if we give people enough free shit and regulate enough things, everything will be perfect. It doesn't work. It never works. It has never worked. It will never
Right.
work. And look, and if you're a well-meaning Democrat, I have a lot of Democratic friends. I know a lot of Democrats. If you're a well-meaning Democrat and you let Bernie Sanders define your party, bye, Felicia.
Right. Um, all right. The next question is, what should, in your opinion, an American citizen prioritize? Justice or freedom?
Well, without the rule of law, there is no freedom. And without individual freedom and individual liberty, the rule of law becomes authoritarianism, fascism. So there has to be a balance between the two. But the rule of law is a fundamental predicate of this government and of all Western democracies. And if you don't have the rule of law and you don't have justice, and you don't have a system where all Americans are treated equally in the eyes of the law and the eyes of the state, then you inevitably will not have freedom.
Thank you. Rick, you obviously play in some of the same circles. What are your opinions on political firebrands such as Milo, Ben Shapiro, and Ann Coulter?
Well, Ann Coulter is a wizened crone who smells of cat urine, Marlboro Reds, and cheap white wine. Um, uh, Ben is very clever. I think his site had a little bit of a speed bump yesterday with that video. I don't think that was necessarily very clever. And frankly, I don't think much of Milo at all. His 15 minutes were up several minutes ago.
Um, as the moderator, I just want to say that was an amazing answer. All right, next question. How do new forms of media, such as Discord, which has grown at 7,000% year over year, impact the political atmosphere?
Well, I think one of the things that platforms like Discord and Twitter and Snapchat and everything else end up doing is they reduce the friction inside of politics. They reduce the ability or the difficulty of getting a message out to individual voters and individual Americans. Now, the downside of that is there are so many more outlets and there's so many more, it's so fractioned and it's so split into little segments that you've got to hit a lot of different messages in a lot of different ways. I mean, look, it used to be in my business where, if I decided we're in a Senate race or a congressional race and it's the end of the campaign and the campaign's close, we're going to put up 3,000 points of television, nuke the world, and by the end of the next week, everybody's going to have seen that television ad. They're going to be talking about it. Okay. Well, it doesn't work that way anymore. Now we live in an environment where there are multiple streams of social media, where there are ideologically siloed streams of media, where there are an awful lot of folks who are getting their news from Twitter and from Facebook and from Snapchat and other sources. So there's this mosaic now. So the friction has gone down of reaching people, but the difficulty of effectively targeting them is still quite high.
Thank you. Next question is, Rick, how did you get involved in politics? And do you have any tips for people who might want to get involved someday?
Sure. I got involved in politics pretty much by accident. I was thinking about going to grad school and figuring out what to do next in my life, and ended up working for a guy named Connie Mack, who was running for U.S. Senate. And that led me to working for George H.W. Bush as a field director for him in Florida. And then I worked in Washington in the first Bush administration for this guy named Dick Cheney, who was the Secretary of Defense. And then after that was over, when Clinton won, I came back out and went into actual, media consulting and political consulting, and I've been doing it ever since. Races, like I said, all over the country, and probably elected an awful lot of conservatives across the country and across the world. And the way you get involved in politics is to get involved in politics. You literally have to go volunteer on a campaign. You have to go work on a campaign. You have to do the shit work, the driving, the door knocking, the yard sign stuff, and nobody should be too proud to do that. It's a great introduction to dealing with people. And I tell people this a lot. Volunteering for a political campaign will sharpen a lot of the skills you need in your life in other areas, because you talk to a lot of people, you're dealing with a lot of details, you're moving fast, you're accountable immediately. You've got a lot of things going on. It's actually it's an exhausting lifestyle in some ways. There have been years where I've traveled over 200 days out of the year, and it can be very hectic, but it's also a very exhilarating lifestyle. And in the consulting space, it's it certainly is an area where you're dealing with these complex multivariate problems all the time. It's pretty exciting.
Thanks, Rick. The next question is, Rick, you were part of Rudy Giuliani's Senate campaign. One would argue, what was that?
Yeah, yes.
Sorry. So I don't normally use the swear words, but I know you do, so I'm going to be okay with asking their question with the slight swear word here. Rick, you were part of Rudy Giuliani's Senate campaign. What makes Rudy Giuliani not as much of a bullshitter as Donald Trump?
Well, it's very simple. Rudy Giuliani, starting in 1993, managed to almost single-handedly, against the will of New York's political leadership and the governor, single-handedly turn New York City around. He cleaned up the city. He got the squeegee men off the streets. He got the panhandlers off the streets. He stopped the public, urination and defecation in the parks and the streets. They employed a variety of policing techniques that made New York's crime rate drop, from almost 2,000 murders a year by about 75% in the space of 3 years. They stopped the crimes of violence, the crimes that were causing the quality of life in New York to descend into almost pure chaos. Almost politically speaking, overnight, he rebuilt New York's economy. He rebuilt the Times Square. He cleaned up the New York and turned it into an international tourist destination like it had never been before. So, Rudy Giuliani actually accomplished an awful lot of things as mayor of New York, and a lot of the things he accomplished was remarkable. Donald Trump has accomplished being a bullshitter, putting his name on buildings that other people build, and being a reality TV host.
No, thank you. So, Rick, we have quite a few Europeans here. So, I'd say a good 20-30% of the server is also from Europe and from other countries. So, we're going to dig into some of those. Rick, what is your opinion? This is from a user. What is your opinion on Brexit? Will the UK come out stronger because of it? If so, how long will we have to wait to see such progress?
Well, I do think the UK is going to come out of Brexit. I was actually a fan of Brexit for a couple of reasons. Is, again, going back to who I am not a statist. I am not a person who believes in larger and larger governments and bureaucratic states. I'm not a believer in singular regional super administrative organizations like the EU. I believe that nations do eventually pursue their interests, do eventually pursue their own economic and cultural destinies. And so I think the UK will come out of Brexit fine. I think there will be a lot of short-term pressure and long-term hassle, but at the end of the day, you're going to end up with, I think, a a Great Britain still trades with the European Union, still trades with other countries, but has recaptured some of its sovereignty, and I don't have a problem with that.
All right, great. This is another question. Rick, what is your opinion on the Conservative Party in Britain and Theresa May's leadership in general?
Well, I think she's a little bit snake bit as a candidate and as a leader, and I think that she's got a, I think she's been fairly clumsy in navigating the Brexit process so far. That said, I think if the alternative is uh, is their version of Bernie Sanders, then she's the better choice, and eventually will triumph. Like that long process of people, becoming, as they say, Londonified, um, and becoming sort of moving from being conservative to liberals, and then when they make their money moving back towards conservatives. I think that process is ongoing, and I think that you know Britain's cultural changes. I think she's fairly on point on that. But obviously, even if you compare the UK to the US, even her as a conservative, her politics are far to the left of ours.
Thank you. Next question comes from another user, and it is Rick, I'm a conservative, but in the middle on some of Trump's standpoints. Why do you think the market rose and didn't fall the day after the election and still seems to be rising?
Well, I'll give you two big answers there. The number one answer is that the market is still held aloft by a cushion of Fed liquidity that, although they keep saying they're going to slow it down, they haven't truly slowed it down in any meaningful way. So that liquidity is the number one reason the market is continuing to move up. The second reason is the market is still anticipating that by some miracle they're going to pass a gigantic business tax cut, and that they're going to pass a gigantic business tax cut that Wall Street will love, that'll preserve carried interest and all the other things that Wall Street and frankly Goldman Sachs wants. So that's why the market hasn't fallen. And look, I've been alive long enough now to remember when Pets.com was a lovely investment, and there's some sense in the market right now that the combination of liquidity and bullshit has led to it being a little bit inflated.
Great. Next question comes from a user, and the question is Rick, what is your opinion on the identity crisis that the GOP is going through, especially with Trump destroying the GOP brand? Can the GOP rebound from this, or is 2020 a guaranteed win for the Democrats?
No, the Democrats can easily blow 2020. They can easily blow it. Look, here's the thing. The Democrats are good at some things in politics, but they are holistically terrible at doing everything right. Trump didn't win as much as Hillary lost, and the fact of the matter is the Democrats relied on the stunt casting element of, just like they did with Obama. They thought, oh, she's the first woman president, therefore it's going to be fine if we just. Sorry, guys, I'm in an airport, so just pardon me.
No, you're
Me
good.
being in an airport, there's a surprise. Sorry, but they relied on the stunt casting aspect. So the Democrats can easily blow 2020. They can easily mess it up. It is not even and not even a remote possibility they can mess it up. They're terrible at politics. I mean, listen, as much as the alt-right dickheads and the Breitbart guys hate guys like me, you know what guys like me did in the last 10 years? We helped win 1,000 seats for the Republican Party across the country. 1,000. We took back state legislatures all over the country. We helped elect majorities all over the country. And the reason we were able to do that wasn't because we were Donald Trump. It was because we went out and did politics better than the Democrats do. We went out and did the mechanical things of politics, which still matter at the end of the day. So it's entirely possible the Democrats can blow it in 2020. And frankly, the structural elements of the Senate in particular and the House, because of redistricting in the House and the Senate just because of the calendar, they're not awful years for Republicans. Now, of course, anything's possible. Look, the Republicans looked very safe in 1972 for the 74 elections, and then because of Watergate, there's 49 House seats and 8 Senate seats. So these things are entirely, they can change quickly. But I wouldn't ever say there's an inevitability about the Democrats winning anything. So just a second, a young mole just asked, is there anything in particular Dems can do to improve their ability to be good at politics? Yeah. Places where their values reflect just the national democratic agenda, that if they go out and run in places where they can, so if you have a race in the deep South, let's say, maybe your Democratic candidate gets the chance not to have to be 100% pro-abortion and 100% pro-gun control. Maybe if you want to win, you give them a little flexibility in it.
All right, great. Thank you. This is another user's question. Rick, an article came out today that says the White House aides treat Trump like a child, never saying no and inventing distractions. While we all know many people use quote unquote sources as evidence, is this true?
Well, I think it's obviously true. I also think that, this whole thing about, you can't have anonymous sources. I'm sorry, that's not how it works in journalism, ever, on either side. And the fact of the matter is that they do have to put it that way. His behavior is obvious from the outside. You can see how he behaves as a president. You can see how his actions are counterproductive to achieving things that the White House wants to achieve, both politically and a whole bunch of other areas of the leadership. And so obviously they have to manage this guy. And this isn't just one or two reports. This is multiple sources over a long period of time.
All right, great. Next question is from another user, and it is, Rick, obviously the events in Charlottesville were tragic. Minus the vehicle, do you think that Donald Trump helped fuel the violence in Charlottesville?
Well, I think he has played footsie with a lot of people who have some fairly hideous views about race. I think he has taken a very, very long time to speak categorically about people who believe that there are meaningful racial differences in the eyes of the Constitution. I think that when he said there were good people on both sides, we use in the South called the turd in the punch bowl, and once you have a turd, punch is spoiled. So there could have been 1,000 great guys in that march on in Charlottesville, and 10 Klansmen or 10 Richard Spencers or 10 of these alt-right douchebags. And guess what? That's the turd in the punch bowl. And Trump is okay with that turd in the punch bowl. He has sent a lot of signals to them. He has sent a lot of dog whistles to them. And these are people who there's a reason why try to hide their identities and hide behind the frog icon and all that stuff. Yeah, because they recognize, they understand deep in their hearts that this is a dead end and frankly an ideology that flirts with evil. But so I do blame Donald Trump for allowing space for those people to feel like they've got a champion. I blame him for not having immediately back in the beginning of his campaign, don't do things like retweet white genocide TM, and don't play these games with people who obviously have an agenda that is repugnant in every possible way when it comes to the frank and fundamental level of our Constitution, which views people, no matter their skin color or no matter their religion and so on, under the Constitution, they should be viewed equally. And the fact that he wouldn't do that early was something I think that gave them a lot of oxygen.
All right, thank you. So this next question, it's fairly simple. It's not deep, but I think it's a great question, and I picked it because sometimes simple is good. The question comes from Bob Schiffer, and the question is, Rick, you are obviously a patriot, given your background. What do you think each side needs to do to stop this insanity that is occurring in attacking each other from both sides?
Well, look, I mean, I'm all for a good political scrap. I'm all for a full contact sport in politics because politics is a full contact sport. I mean, the funny thing about a lot of these alt right in the last year who thought they were oh, talking shit about me or talking about my family or whatever, if they don't think I've been through that already, please. But look, politics in this country has now reached the point where that lack of friction on social media has made things. It's made it easier to get uglier faster. And so I think in a lot of cases, it's important that we do step back a little bit. I mean this on both sides of the equation. It's gotten pretty boring about how very old the arguments are on both sides now. I mean, the Democrats are still arguing on that as long as they can regulate enough and build bigger labor unions, it's going to be all fine. And Republicans are still arguing that as long as we cut taxes deeply enough, it's going to be all fine. So, I mean, we're just in a I think in a situation where neither party's promises to their base are going to be fulfilled, and it's time for both parties to either reassess or to evolve. And I do think right now the four basic political parties in the country: a sort of Trumpian populist party, which is pretty small, but it helped elect the president; a traditional Republican party, which is limited government, rule of law, and constitutionalism; a sort of practical politics, Hillary-ish, Obama-ish Democratic Party, and a Bernie party.
All right, great. So guys, obviously, Rick, when I talked to him prior before I get to the next question, Rick is pretty okay with any question that's asked to him. So I want to be clear about that. And he wants a spicy one. So, sometimes we get AMAs in here and they have some rules and stuff, but Rick said pretty much bring them on. So I'm going to get to the next question here. That's Philosophist. And it says, Rick, first Reagan, then the Bushes, now Trump. Are you ashamed of winning yet?
Am I ashamed of winning yet? Was I ashamed that I Bush 41 win? No. Was I ashamed that I helped W win? No, absolutely not. They're under no circumstances. I would much rather have had, George W. Bush sitting in that chair on 9/11 than fucking Al Gore. Are you kidding me? I would much rather had George H.W. Bush as president, and I was proud to serve him as president when Saddam invaded Kuwait and when the wall came down and when the world changed after the end of the Cold War. Difficult and dangerous time of our modern political history. I'm perfectly happy with those gentlemen. As for Trump, I get that you guys think the nation of Gorsuch and a few regulatory rollback calculated, in little limited doses are equal to, say, winning the Cold War, but you're not. And so there's not really accomplishment from Trump yet that has meaningfully changed the destiny of this country on a positive direction.
All right, great. The next question comes from another user. The question is, Rick, I voted for Donald Trump in 2016. I was on the fence when I voted for Donald Trump, and now, most likely, he will be the candidate in 2020. Regardless of who the candidate is on the Democratic side, as a Republican, and I am a Republican as well, should I not vote for Donald Trump?
Well, look, I think you're going to have a choice to make in November of 2020. And, I'm not positive the Republican nominee will be Donald Trump yet, not because I think he's going to lose a primary, but I think Donald Trump is not having fun. I don't think Donald Trump is enjoying his life. I don't think Donald Trump is enjoying the White House. I don't think he likes what's happening every day, where he can't go out and run buck wild and do what the hell he wants. So, I don't know that the nominee is going to beat Trump. And I don't know who the Democrats are going to put forward. They have a variety of people that may rise in their party that they could put forward, all of whom are terrible candidates, and a few of whom are slightly less terrible candidates. But you know, I find it incredibly difficult to see a Donald Trump happily running in 2020, um, just because he is a just because he is a man um, who is not able intellectually to handle the job of president, and he's not equipped to handle it in terms of personal discipline and in terms of focus and in terms of the intellectual horsepower you need to be president.
Thanks, Rick. So we're going to go to a fun one here that a user asked. I thought was great. Rick, you are all over social media and are obviously familiar with memes. While you may not like Donald Trump, can you at least admit you love Pepe the Frog?
You know, I look at Pepe as sort of the equivalent of acid wash jeans in the 90s or bell bottoms in the 70s. It's something people will briefly think is the coolest fucking thing on earth. And then about 10 years from now, they're going to go, oh man, that was not a good.
All right. Thank you. So the next question is with the lowest approval rating on record in presidential history, what will it take for your fellow conservatives in Congress and the House to say enough is enough with Donald Trump?
Look, there's almost no circumstance where conservatives impeach Donald Trump in the House, where the House impeached Donald Trump. Almost none whatsoever. It's almost impossible. Um, just because of the sheer numbers you need to do it. And look, most Republicans in the Senate and I would say a solid majority in the House, they're not going to say it publicly. They've already abandoned Donald Trump. They're already running for the hills on their own, recognizance. They're running as their own kind of candidates. They are running as folks who who have gone out and they're going to try to get away from the blast radius. So but look, as I jokingly say, sometimes Trump could eat a live baby on the White House lawn, but and the House wouldn't impeach him. I mean, I tell people that all the time. Impeachment is one of the hardest political things in the world.
All right. Thank you. The next question is Rick, I'm an avid fan. Thank you for showing up today. How do you feel about the fact that Donald Trump is the strongest person in America, yet you're able to stay relevant as a Republican going against him? And how do you do it?
Well, shit, I drank a lot of coffee. No, listen, I am one of a lot of people who have deep concerns about the direction he's taking the country and about the risks he's put us through in terms of his impulsivity, his lack of character, his behavior, etc. So, I have stayed relevant, if you want to look at it that way, by taking a position where I'm putting my country over my party. I'm putting principles in front of the easy thing. Listen, I could have shut my mouth about Donald Trump, and believe me, I got the offer back in the day, back in 15. I could have shut my mouth on Donald Trump and made $3 or $4 million off the deal. Okay, I could have been a good soldier and just shut up. But after 30 plus years in this business, and after watching this party go up and down in various iterations over the years, I thought that this guy was a threat to this country in ways that we had rarely seen, and that you know I felt it was a moral obligation to speak out and stand up. I've done so, and frankly, uh, Donald Trump has a lot of people living in his head all the time. He's got a lot of people he worries about. If I'm one of them, God bless.
All right. Thank you. I have a feeling you might be Um, so the next question is, uh, Rick, what is your opinion on both Ron Paul and Rand Paul? And do you think Rand Paul is someone who can actually help save the Republican Party?
Well, I think Ron Paul is nuttier than a bushel of squirrel poop. Um, and I think Rand Paul is a very smart guy. And we'll see where Rand goes. I think he's sort of been a little bit back and forth this year. On the one hand, trying to sort of work within the Trump framework, and on the other hand, trying to stick to his principles. I like Rand a lot. Ron is a nutcase. So we all have a crazy uncle in the basement, and that's your Ron right there.
All right, thank you. The next question comes from Solomon, and it says, Rick, what are your thoughts on Trump renegotiating NAFTA and scrapping TPP? Are you worried these types of agreements will eventually lead to corporatism?
Well, let me start with the corporatism part. Um, yes, and let me touch on both TPP and NAFTA. TPP did have some flaws in it, particularly regarding intellectual property that I wasn't completely, rah about every day. But the upside of TPP was that it built a Western and American framework in Asia before China came into the deal, because China isn't covered in TPP. So it would have really worked very well to help American relations with Korea, Japan, Taiwan, and Vietnam in terms of our trade processes and trade and reducing the friction of trade with those countries before China had cut separate unilateral trade deals with. So that's why I object to TPP being booted. As for NAFTA, one of the greatest political myths in this country is that NAFTA has been a bad thing. NAFTA has been an unbelievably, overwhelmingly positive thing for Americans. It has been a boon for American consumers and American companies, and it has improved the economy of both the U.S. and of Mexico. And NAFTA is a win. NAFTA is a solid win. And listen, I get that Trump has demagogued NAFTA like a lot of other people in the past, like Ross Perot did. But the fact of the matter is, NAFTA has been a win. Getting rid of NAFTA is going to cause enormous economic harm and dislocation, and you're going to see people who are hurt in ag states like Texas and Kansas, Missouri, Oklahoma. You're going to see people who are hurt in timber states like Washington and Oregon, and Montana. You're going to see people who are hurt in Florida with the citrus industry, and you're going to see in a variety of companies that have been unable or that have been able to do very well economically by serving American consumers with trade preferred products out of Mexico and Canada and vice versa. And I think it's just an enormously shallow, and I get it. It's a dumbass Breitbart talking point. It's a dumbass Ross Perot talking point, and it works really well with people who don't understand economics or trade.
All right. The next question is, Rick, thank you for coming today. Do you think Mike Pence would be a better president than Donald Trump?
Well, Mike Pence is sane, so that's a start. Um, and I do think he has got a more considered grounding in modern conservatism. But listen, Mike Pence was brought on board because Donald Trump needed somebody who was an ambassador to the establishment. And so I don't know that Trump's base would accept Pence as president, um, because he's not Donald Trump.
All right, great. The next question is it more important to vote principle or party?
Well, look, I believe it's important to vote principle, and let me tell you, as a Republican who's helped elect a lot of Republicans in blue states and blue cities over the years, I've always asked the members of the other party to come and vote on something bigger than their partisan identification. And for instance, when we did Rudy Giuliani's reelection in 1997 in New York, the registration there was basically 5-1 Democratic. And we were asking Democrats to cross party lines because Rudy had improved the quality of life and reduced crime and helped save the city. We weren't doing it on all the traditional old school, left versus right, Republican versus Democrat tropes. We were going after a a choice by people and giving them an option to vote for somebody who was maybe a different party, but the principle of what he was doing was right. You didn't have to agree with everything, but you had to agree with some of the things, and you had to be able to step outside of your party boundaries. So that's sort of my answer on that one.
All right, great. The next question comes from a user, and this is why you've been going. They said, Rick, so far you seem to be anti Trump, pro Republican, and anti Democrat. How do you feel about an alternative voting system or other solution that would bring us out of a two-party system?
Well, the question there comes down to this: how do you get 270 in a presidential election? And it's real hard, trust me. I know this direct personal experience. Um, but look, most states make it fairly difficult for third parties and independent candidates to play on the ballot. Most states make it almost impossible for a third-party presidential candidate to win their state. So I think look, we used to think that there were only a couple of companies that could service certain needs. There used to be only AT&T essentially, and then we've got a billion different carriers and a billion different ways to communicate now. So I think there are a tremendous number of challenges ahead for third parties and independent parties, but I think that I think they're getting more of a hearing than they ever have before, and B, I think it's important that we continue to look at that, because in many places they may represent the politics and the beliefs of the people in those states or districts or cities better than the Republicans or the Democrats.
All right, thank you. Rick, next question. Rick, do you believe, since you have your hands essentially in the cookie jar and know many people within the White House, that Donald Trump will actually attack North Korea, or is this all hot air?
Well, I'm not sure where the cookie jar part of that comes in, but I the national security establishment. I know there are a lot of people in the defense and intelligence communities who recognize that an attack on North Korea leads to a extraordinarily dangerous set of circumstances that could lead to the deaths of between tens of thousands and millions of people in Japan and South Korea. So um, the, those professional establishment in the intelligence community working very hard to ensure that there's enough friction in the system and enough awareness in the system of how dangerous that might be, so that we don't end up having something that goes down in history as essentially something genocidal.
All right, great. Next question from a user who follows you quite a bit. Rick, you are obviously very candid and always tell us how it is. Number one, what is your take on players kneeling during the national anthem? And number two, did Jerry Jones come out recently against it because someone spoke to him?
I can't speak to the Jerry Jones thing, um, and here's the deal: I wouldn't take a knee, but I wouldn't take a knee not because of some ephemeral current description of what the anthem means. The last time I checked, Scott Key wasn't writing about first responders, okay? But out of general respect, and because of the situation I have in life, I wouldn't take the knee. But I believe I'm a free speech, very nearly a free speech absolutist. And I think if these guys want to take the knee, you take the knee, you take the consequences. And some of them are willing to do that. And you have to admire that on one level. And this is a private enterprise, a private business. These are private companies with contractors who work for those companies. And so the president's desire to modify their behavior, is obviously about a very, cheap base play to keep his people riled up and excited because, he's trying to make this into the most important issue in the world. Well, it's not. The most important issues right now are, I don't know, existential threats to the US like North Korean hydrogen bombs. And the fact that this is a guy who is deeply compromised in a million different ways, and one of the most serious federal investigations of modern times about the ties of his campaign to Russia. There are a lot of things he wants to take your mind off of. So I really don't spend a lot of time worrying about the kneeling issue. Um, the market will solve the problem. If the kneeling is such an egregious thing for American people, they'll stop watching. If it's such an egregious thing, they'll tell the teams they're not going to come to the games if so and so is playing. So if that's the issue, that's how that'll work itself out, in my view. But the reason Trump is talking about it is because he has no other accomplishments. Everything else he's done is turned to shit, and he really wants to make sure that his base, stays rah rah.
All right, thank you. I always read them word for word, so I'm going to read this one word for word. Rick, Donald Trump is a sack of shit. He won the election based on the electoral vote, but got obliterated in the popular vote. As a Republican, would you prefer we move to a popular vote, or do you still believe in the electoral system?
I still believe in the Electoral College for a very simple reason. It's how the Constitution's wired. You want to change the Constitution? Good, do it. But if you don't, then we're not going to change to some sort of winner take all or national popular vote system that requires an amendment to the Constitution. You amend the Constitution, yeah, go forward. When the Constitution is amended, that's now a part of the Constitution. But until then, it's just pie in the sky bullshit. So the Electoral College exists. It's going to continue to exist as it is currently constituted for some time in the future. And other things are just a fantasy.
Thanks, Rick. This is kind of an off-topic question, but I like to throw those in sometimes. What is your take on the fact that many scientists believe aliens exist and the government is hiding them?
So I believe aliens exist because of just the Drake equation and the size of the galaxy and the size of the universe. I don't believe there are any. I have no reason to believe that they don't exist elsewhere, but I have no evidence of their presence in our on our planet.
I always like to throw a fun one in there. So the next question comes from another user, Rick. What do you think the primary victory of Roy Moore over Luther Strange means about the current state of the GOP?
Well, I think Roy winning that race is and about Donald Trump's inability to deliver. I mean, look, he could not, no matter how much he pushed and no matter how many rallies he did, um, uh, overcome a guy who had very, very high name ID and who had played in Alabama politics for a long time on some particularly hot button issues among Republican primary voters. So, Roy is a brand in Alabama politics. He is the guys. It's one of those guys where he's a prick, but he's our. And so I think you've got a situation where Roy's name ID, stature, etc., made it very difficult for Luther Strange and Donald Trump to beat him. Now, I do think that Trump putting his credibility on the line, and the thought that Trump has this magic touch that can, turn everybody on, was wrong. What you saw, and what a lot of other Republicans in other states saw, was that the Trump touch is about Trump. It's not about other candidates. So I think Roy Moore is essentially a fairly narrow case a fairly narrow seat, but certainly something that Trump would have preferred to have won.
All right, great. Next question, Rick. When you look at Democratic candidates who may run in 2020, such as Tulsi Gabbard, who is a veteran and also big on guns, and one could argue is more of a Republican than a Democrat, why do you think the Democratic Party is holding them back currently? And what is your opinion on both Tulsi Gabbard and Kamala Harris?
Well, let me give you the two. First off, I think Kamala Harris is way, way, way too far to the left for the country. And if the Democrats want to win 6 or maybe 7 states, God bless you, and they put Harris up as your nominee. She is way too far to the left for most of the country. Way too far. Tulsi Gabbard is more impressive, and I look, if I were the Democrat, I would be looking for veterans, particularly of recent vintage, in terms of who they put out there for candidates. I don't think Tulsi Gabbard necessarily has a big enough national profile yet, but there's certainly something, there's certainly she's rising as somebody who's not a cookie cutter Democrat. So there's been a question over and over again asked by /R Trump from Reddit. And I want to address this really quickly because apparently the person's going to ask the question.
Yeah, I didn't ask it, Rick. So I'll go ahead and ask it so everybody knows what it is. No. I'll ask it so everybody knows what it is. He's a complete. So he is the owner of r/Trump on Reddit. He is a troll, and I was going to save his question for you to rip him apart because him and I both have gotten into it many times about Donald Trump. And he is a complete fool, in my opinion. But I'm going to go ahead and ask it anyway. And Rick,
yep, here we go. Here we go. Let me just address it.
Go ahead.
So he has asked me, you say everything Trump touches turns bad. What do you say about the sheer volume of the following positive metric? He's one at a time, and we can be done. Now by Fed liquidity, stock markets, Fed liquidity, consumer confidence, Fed liquidity, unemployment rate. Well, in Obama, we used to say that these unemployment rates, the labor force participation rate was the big deal. Well, it's just as high or higher than it was under Obama. And although the top line number is down, the labor force participation rate is also down. So no, not a win. Workforce labor rate, I don't know what you're talking about. Jobs added, they've been going along pretty much at the same basic level that they happened during Obama. The national debt has increased dramatically, you dumb fuck. ISIS's rapid collapse. ISIS has been collapsing because of a variety of reasons. Thing that Trump has personally done. NATO financial participation from other countries. That is a complete line of horseshit from Donald Trump. You don't understand how NATO funding works. You don't understand it at all. I've been around this block. I've dealt with NATO burden sharing negotiations in my past. And the fact of the matter is, they haven't changed because of Donald Trump. They've changed in part because of the rising threat from Russia in the East. They haven't changed because Donald Trump got in there. And they started increasing their participation rate in NATO 4 or 5 years ago during Barack Obama. So, again, dumb. Russia and China voting with us in the UN against North Korea, well, they both have reasons to do that are beyond, loving Donald Trump, you dumb fuck. And also border wall funding. There is no border wall funding. You have no border wall funding. You will get no border wall funding. There will never be a fucking wall. Grow up. You will never get a wall. Ha ha ha. You got suckered. Thank you. Moving on.
God damn it. That was okay. First off, may unmute everybody for this because this person has been going on for this forever and everyone knows them in the server out of 17,000 plus. So, I said the same exact thing. Thank you. And I'm not fully a Republican, but I think everyone here is slowly laughing because no matter what, they talk in circles. If you say there's no border funding and there isn't any and it's never been signed, they go, well, it's coming. And you start to run into the same exact thing. Yeah, it's over and over. The same.
The House passed something out of committee. It's not.
So let me ask you this:
Trump.
Why do you think the wall would never be built?
I can give you three big reasons why the wall will never be built. One, it's physically impractical to build a wall from the Pacific Ocean to the Gulf, including the mountains, etc. Second, it won't do what they say it does. It won't accomplish what they think it will accomplish. It is boob bait for slow learners. It is sucker bait. Dumbass people who believe dumbass things, the same people who go out and do reverse mortgages and buy 10 fucking lottery tickets every week, are going to believe in the wall. The wall is a sign of a lack of common sense and intelligence. Believing in the wall is like believing that you're going to win the lottery. It's a remote mathematical possibility, but it ain't going to happen to you. And the fact of the matter is that the wall was this talisman among people who fell for the Trump con, and it's not going to work.
Fair enough. The next question comes from a Trump supporter. And do you believe George Soros is a threat? And what is your take on Alex Jones?
What was my take on what?
Alex Jones.
Alex Jones is bug fuck loco, and he is a guy who has a shtick that again appeals to people who are the conspiratorial bent, and it is tragic that we have people in this country who believe in the broke conspiracy theories that Alex Jones believes. And somebody just asked me about, did the DHS move? Yes, the House Home Committee may have approved the bill. It hasn't the Senate. It's never going to be approved by the Senate. There will never be a wall.
Period. Sorry, folks.
.com.
I told you that shit for a while. All right, next question. And I'm a lefty, Rick's a righty. We both agree there's gonna be no fucking wall. All right, next question. I'm sorry I had to do that. Next question. Given the identity crisis the Democratic Party is going through and the shakeup in GOP establishment.
Hold on, you broke up. I'm sorry, you broke up there.
Can you hear me now?
I've got you.
All right. Given the identity crisis the Democratic Party is going through and the shakeup in the GOP establishment, do you think the anti-establishment sentiment that got Trump elected is going to have a negative or positive impact on Republicans' chances in the 2018 midterms?
Well, I do think there is a potential that if Steve Bannon nominates a bunch of people, much like we did with Christine O'Donnell and Richard Murdoch and other folks like that, and Sharon Angle, the Democrats will have an easier skate than they might otherwise. So those things are certainly a serious question for Republicans moving forward. Is, do you want the highest quality candidates, the best possible candidates for office in the right states, or do you want people who meet Steve Bannon's ideological checklist?
Fair enough. Hey, Rick, are you familiar with paleoconservatism?
I am familiar with paleoconservatism.
So a user asked what your opinion on that was.
It was tired when Pat Buchanan rolled out it's tired now. It reflects a world that doesn't exist and hasn't existed for probably 75 years. And I think there's a meaningful degree of racial inflection to paleoconservatism. But generally speaking, I think its economic prescriptions don't reflect the world that we live in today.
All right, guys. So we're gonna get in like 3 or 4 more questions. Rick, the next question is: you seem to believe that Donald Trump is undisciplined and impulsive. This is a long one. You seem to believe that Donald Trump is undisciplined and impulsive, but many times he seems to come out on top and get what he wants. He has written books about erratic behavior in negotiations in order to make people argue against red herrings and get their way to where he wants. Do you really believe that is him being a bullshitter, as you say? Or do you think he has some level of method to the madness? Or do you think really that it's all bullshit? If it is all bullshit, which I'm assuming you will say, how do you explain the success in the private sector he has had?
He hasn't had that success in the private sector. Donald Trump is lying about his success in the private sector. Listen, I've been around New York politics and New York business a long time, and absolutely no one in the New York real estate market ever looks at Donald Trump and says, "Oh, that's a serious candidate. That's a serious guy." Donald Trump is a has-been and afterthought. I mean, if you look at the guys who really do business in New York, the real real estate moguls, they're worth 25, 35 billion dollars, real billion dollars. You know, I tell a story that really opened my eyes about something with Trump. And I have a client who's a hedge fund guy, extraordinarily wealthy person. And I sat in his office in August of 2015 in New York City. And I said, listen, we got to stop this guy. He's a billionaire. He can fund whatever he wants. He held his hand up and he says, no, I'm a billionaire. Donald Trump is a clown living on credit. Most folks that really look at Trump's numbers think he's worth about $700 to $800 million tops. Now, that's still very wealthy. That's still very, very, very rich. But this is a guy who's the character he played on TV and the character that Tony Schwartz wrote about in The Art of the Deal is not Donald Trump. That's a character. That's somebody that doesn't exist in the real world. And the person that exists in the real world is the one who sits in meetings and is unable to focus. And the person that exists in the real world is the guy that's tweeting on his toilet at 6 o'clock in the morning, rage tweeting about whoever pissed him off that day. This is not a billionaire superstar negotiator. This is a guy who, and he doesn't come out on top. He's lost battle after battle in Washington. I mean, look, he has promised things that will never be delivered. He has promised things that is the only people that believe it. The only people that believe it are the people that are members of the Trump cult. Based almonds asked, what do I think about croissant? I'm not a big crocodile guy, honestly. It's not my thing. Neither croissant nor crocodile work for me. I need something like a little stronger.
All right. This next question, we're going to do 3 more, and then Rick can answer as many as he wants in that chat, obviously, but I don't want to hold you too long. I know you got a flight. So the question is, number 3 of the last 3 is, ignoring Trump for this one, what is your opinion on the race issue in America, and do you believe it is as big an issue politically as we make it out to be?
Well, I believe it is a politically difficult issue, and I believe it is a politically painful issue. As a lot of people raised in the deep South, I will say this: we have come a lot further than we've come a lot further than a lot of people on the left give us credit for, and we haven't come as far as people on the right give us credit for. And I think that the reemergence of people in the American political process who are directly racially affected, like Richard Spencer and these guys, are doing enormous harm to the American body politic, and they know they're doing it.
All right, great. Last of 2 questions. Question 2 of the last is, Rick, you seem to attribute a lot of the things to be particular failures to Trump. But do you attribute failure to the repeal of the ACA to Trump, despite the fact that virtually the same Congress was fully capable to put failed ACA repeals onto Obama's desk?
I actually blame the failure of Obamacare repeal on 2 factors. I do blame Trump for promising a lot of stuff that he couldn't deliver, but I also blame the Republicans because they frankly it wasn't terrifying to the American voter. And let me say this, and I do have to go pretty soon, guys. I've got a plane to catch. But I will say this: Republicans had 7 years, and even back in 2009, we were doing focus on healthcare, and we were doing focus groups on Obamacare. Republicans, Democrats, liberals, conservatives, no matter who you were or where in the country, we did 16 cities with 2 focus groups each over that year, and it was an amazing experience because everyone was terrified of pre-existing. Everyone was terrified of the way their premiums were rising. Now, Obamacare didn't fix any of those things, but at least they perceived it was going to. And if you didn't preserve pre-existing, no matter what you did, it was always going to go down in flames. And they didn't. They ended up box where they weren't preserving pre-existing, and so it really hurt them in their efforts to repeal it. And and Trump was all over the board, close all the members, so the whole thing kind of fell apart. And I blame the Congress for that. I blame the Congress for not having a considered and smart plan to do an Obamacare repeal. And it's inexcusable. It's malpractice that we didn't do it for 7 freaking years. I'm not a policy guy, but
Right.
God forbid.
All right. So we got first off, before we end, Rick, we got one more question, and before we end, we want to say thank you. We are all huge fans. I want everybody to check out.
Well, thanks again, guys.
Are you there? Are you there, Rick?
I'm here. I lost you.
I just posted. Sorry, I didn't realize I was muted. The last thing, guys, I posted Rick's Twitter and his movie. Everything Trump touches dies. I know a lot of you commies, you're gonna check this out. Don't lie. Go there, donate. Let's get this going, Rick. Before I ask the last question, I want to say thanks. We appreciate your time. We appreciate you coming here. I know you're busy. We all watch you on TV. So the fact that our users got to come here today and ask you these questions, we are most grateful for that.
Sass, thank you for having me. I appreciate it, and I appreciate the time, and I hope that I answered as many questions as we could here. I can stick for a few more minutes to answer some
One last question. One last question before we go. One last question. And that is going to be the final question. And here we go. And here it is. Will Donald Trump be impeached in the next 7 years? And do you believe he had any doing in the Russian involvement in the 2016 election?
I'm sorry, I lost you there. You were breaking up.
Do you think Donald Trump will ever be impeached? And do you think he had anything to do with the Russian involvement in the 2016 election?
I do not believe he will ever be impeached, just because of the dynamics of the House. I do believe that the Trump organization and people around Donald Trump directly conspired and engaged with the Russians on a variety of matters. And I do believe that it will be revealed that Donald Trump has much deeper business and financial ties to Russia and to Russian oligarchs close to Vladimir Putin than has been revealed to date. And they posed an imminent conflict of interest with him at all points in the election.
Rick, thank you so much for coming. We've got 2018 coming up, 2020. We hope you come back, visit us. We appreciate your time. We hope you have a safe flight. Thank you so much, Rick.
Thanks again, Sass. I appreciate it.
All right, take care.
I'm boarding at 7:50, so I'm going to have about 3 minutes to answer some questions.
You better run and fly safe. We'll see you on TV tomorrow.
You betcha.
Take care, Rick.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.